official poverty thresholds, they rest on an implicit assumption. What is that assumption? The assumption is that all households have the necessary available time or enough resources to compensate for deficits in household production. How do they compensate it? By purchasing market substitutes. So there is an implicit assumption in the official poverty thresholds about time requirements for unpaid household production. For example, if you think about like the minimum food requirements that's there in a poverty line, it usually involves the assumption that somebody is going out shopping for the cheapest food, preparing everything from scratch, and so on. So that's basically an assumption regarding people have time to do that shopping, people have time to prepare meals from the scratch, and so on. So that's what we mean by the implicit assumption regarding requirements of time. Now, for those who do not have that time, poverty lines do not represent the minimum amount of resources that's necessary to avoid material deprivation. Why? Well, because those households with time deficits will have to purchase market substitutes to fill in gaps in household production to attain the poverty threshold, to attain the poverty level of living. Now, we take into account the potential time deficits that people incur and incorporate the monetized value of those time deficits into their consumption poverty line. So we did this research on a number of countries. The list of countries are shown there with the years in the parenthesis indicating the year for which the estimates were developed. Now, the estimates are based on the official national income or consumption poverty lines. As you all know, some countries use income as the marker of material deprivation. The other countries use consumption. So, so part of our estimate, since it's a two-dimensional measure, for the income or the consumption side of that dimension, we use the official lines. And then we have our own estimates of national thresholds for the required time for household production. Right? So I'll show you what seems to me at least, as the key takeaways from this study based on these 7 countries. Finding number 1, first, the incidence of time poverty is pretty pervasive. So it's not safe to assume that people don't have time deficits, so the national poverty lines are okay. The time deficits among employed individuals range like from about 38% in Ghana to 52% in Tanzania. That's the low and the high for this set of countries. The other striking thing, if you observe the gap between the red and the blue lines, the red is for women and the blue is for men, you can see that there is a striking gender disparity in the incidence of time poverty, even after you control for hours of employment. The hours of employment is what's shown in the horizontal axis of this figure. So we have ranges like from people working 31 to say 50 hours per week, 36 to 50 hours a week, and so on, right? 51 to 60 hours and so on. So you can see at any interval that you pick, there is a huge gap between men and women in terms of incidence of time poverty. Apart from at the very top, like when people work more than 61 hours per week, the incidence of time poverty is universal and almost equal across sexes. Moving to the next finding, the key factor behind this differential, the gender differential in the incidence of time poverty, appears to be the gap in the time that men and women spend in terms of required household production. What does that mean? Well, women spend a hell of a lot more time doing household chores and taking care of children than men do, and that's the gap between the blue and the red lines that you can see there across all the different countries that we have looked at. That gap is very striking in all countries, and irrespective of how many hours they work, the gap seems to be pretty stable. Right? So it's really amazing how little that it varies across the hours of employment.